She left him, thinking she could escape his world. 5 years later, a man she once loved walks into her life again. A life she built alone, a little girl she raised in silence, and a love buried under lies and betrayal. Will he prove he's changed? Or will the shadows of his past destroy everything she's fought for? Tonight, the truth comes knocking, and nothing will ever be the same. Amara wiped her hands on the soft apron that had become almost a second skin over the past few years. The rich aroma of roasted coffee beans and sweet pastries lingered in the air, wrapping the tiny coffee shop in a comforting embrace. The little bell above the door jingled as she straightened a chair, glancing up automatically. Alexander stepped in, as he always did around this time. His presence was almost predictable, yet it never failed to stir something unfamiliar in her chest. He was tall, with sharp features softened by the warmest smile. His hair fell just slightly over his eyes, giving him a casual charm that made the world seem slower somehow. "Evening, Amara," he said, his voice smooth, deep, like it had been carved to linger in your thoughts. She returned his smile, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Evening, Alexander." "The usual?" "Absolutely. You know me too well," he replied, a teasing glint in his eye. Amara moved behind the counter, her hands busy, but her mind less so. She couldn't help noticing the way he watched the world with quiet confidence, the little gestures he made that seemed both ordinary and deliberate. He didn't belong in her world. She knew that, but the warmth of his presence made it hard to care. While she prepared his cappuccino, she stole a glance at him. He was scrolling through his phone, his focus absolute, yet his attention seemed tethered to her anyway. "You've got that look again," she said softly, leaning on the counter. He looked up, a slow smile spreading across his face. "That look? You know, the one that makes me wonder what you're thinking," she said, a blush creeping onto her cheeks. He chuckled, the sound like low music. "And what are you thinking?" Amara laughed lightly, shaking her head. "Nothing, just that you're probably up to something." He leaned closer across the counter, eyes locking with her, a spark dancing between them that made her heart stumble. "Maybe I am," he said softly, and there was no arrogance in his voice, only warmth. The coffee shop's soft lighting, the late afternoon sun slipping through the windows, and the gentle hum of the city outside made everything feel suspended, almost unreal. Amara poured the foam carefully into his cup, crafting a small heart on top just as he liked. She handed it to him, their fingers brushing, sending a small electric jolt up her arm. "You always do this," he said, his tone teasing but gentle. "Make me feel like the first person in the world." Amara's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She wasn't used to such attention, especially from someone who seemed so untouchable. She had learned to keep her heart guarded, to measure every interaction carefully, but with him, it felt almost impossible. As the evening went on, they lingered in conversation longer than usual. They talked about music, books, and dreams, mundane things that somehow felt intimate in the dimly lit coffee shop. Each laugh, each shared secret, drew them closer without them realizing it. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward closing time. The shop was nearly empty, save for a few stragglers finishing their drinks. Amara yawned softly, rubbing her eyes. "It's late," she said, a little reluctantly. "I don't mind staying a bit longer," Alexander said, his gaze lingering on her with an intensity that made her stomach twist in a pleasant, confusing way. She shook her head, but the corners of her mouth lifted. "You'll get me in trouble if you stay too long." He leaned casually against the counter, a playful smirk on his face. "Maybe that's the point." Amara felt a rush of warmth, a mixture of nerves and something deeper she didn't fully understand. He wasn't like anyone she had ever met, and yet she felt a strange safety wit. Him, as though he could shield her from everything chaotic in the world, even if just for a few hours. She wiped down the counters and straightened chairs, moving through her small space with practiced ease. Alexander followed her movements with those piercing eyes, quiet, attentive, unintrusive, yet undeniably present. She felt the space between them shrink, an unspoken tension humming in the air. When the last customer left, Amara flipped the sign on the door to closed and leaned against the counter, finally allowing herself a deep breath. The day's exhaustion pressed against her shoulders, but it was tempered by the fluttering in her chest that Alexander's presence always seemed to invoke. "You make closing time feel shorter," she said softly, not entirely sure why she said it. He took a small step closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from him without touching. "And you make the world feel a little safer," he replied, voice low, almost reverent. Amara's heart skipped. There was something in the way he looked at her, a raw honesty that made her breath catch, but also something she couldn't place, something beyond the simple charm he displayed in the coffee shop each day. She began stacking cups absent-mindedly, trying to anchor herself in the mundane task. Her mind, however, was spinning. There was an allure to him, a gravity that pulled her in ways she hadn't expected. The shop was quiet now, the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of New York City outside forming a lullaby that felt both comforting and unsettling. She dared a glance at him. His eyes were dark, focused entirely on her, unreadable yet intense. Amara felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of anticipation and hesitation. "Alexander," she whispered, unsure what she wanted to say. Before she could finish, he closed the distance, his hand brushing hers gently. She looked up, caught in the warmth and intensity of the moment. Time seemed to slow, the air thick with unspoken emotions. And then, with no warning, his lips were on hers. It was soft at first, testing, hesitant, yet demanding in its own quiet way. Amara froze, breathless, her heart hammering as every thought in her mind scattered. The kiss lingered, and with it came a rush of feelings she had buried for years: desire, curiosity, fear, and an overwhelming sense of connection she couldn't name. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to pull back, but part of her didn't want to. Finally, she stepped away, heart racing, eyes wide, cheeks flushed. "Alexander, what?" He smiled, a mix of mischief and something she couldn't decipher. "I've wanted to do that since the first day I walked in here," he admitted softly, almost shyly. Amara swallowed hard, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. He seemed innocent, simple, like he belonged in her world. And yet, in that moment, she felt an intensity that scared her and drew her in all at once. She wanted answers, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't know if she wanted to ask him or if she was afraid of what the truth might be. Her body still hummed from the closeness, yet her mind screamed caution. Alexander tilted his head, watching her with those piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "Amara, don't be afraid," he said softly. "Not tonight." Her pulse raced, and a shiver ran through her as she realized just how much this man had already unsettled her. He was charming, enigmatic, and undeniably dangerous in the sense that he had managed to unsettle every safe corner of her heart. Amara wanted to step back into the ordinary, to focus on the counter, the empty shop, the mundane routine that had always been her sanctuary. But something in Alexander held her in place, a magnetic pull she couldn't resist. Her thoughts spun, questions and possibilities intertwining with desire and confusion. She wanted to understand him, to know every facet of who he was, yet feared the answers might shatter the fragile, the sense of safety she had built around her heart. And as she stared at him, breathless, unsure, she realized she had no control over the way he made her feel. That thought alone was terrifying. The quiet of the shop pressed in around them, the air thick with anticipation, with secrets yet to be revealed. Amara's chest tightened as she tried to steady herself, her gaze locked on his, searching for answers she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. And then, just as she thought she might gather herself and step back into her carefully ordered life, Alexander leaned closer again, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his lips hovering near hers, a dangerous promise lingering in his eyes. Amara's breath caught, heart pounding, mind spinning with conflicting emotions. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. She wanted to scream, to laugh, to cry, all at once. The world outside seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them, the small coffee shop, and a tension that neither of them could deny. And just as her thoughts tangled in a storm of curiosity, desire, and fear, he kissed her again, harder this time, claiming a space in her life she wasn't sure she was ready to surrender. Amara's knees nearly buckled, her pulse racing, mind screaming while her heart betrayed her with each rapid beat. She pulled back slightly, staring at him with wide eyes, the air thick with unspoken words, and the truth of that single electric kiss left her utterly breathless. And in that moment, Amara realized something she couldn't yet name. This man, seemingly simple, seemingly harmless, would change everything. Amara's chest still raced from the kiss, her mind tangled in a web of emotions she didn't know how to untangle. She leaned against the counter, staring at Alexander, trying to catch her breath and make sense of the storm he had stirred in her. He watched her, calm and steady, his expression unreadable, yet every fiber of him seemed focused on her. The city lights outside the coffee shop blurred into streaks as she felt the gravity of the moment pressing down on her. She wanted to speak, to question, to understand what was happening, but the words caught in her throat. He leaned just slightly closer, as if reading the hesitation in her eyes, and whispered, "You don't have to say anything." Her pulse thudded painfully in her ears. It was as if he could see into her soul, into the places she had carefully hidden from the world. The intensity was thrilling, terrifying, and intoxicating all at once. That night, when she finally locked the doors behind her and stepped into the cool air outside, Alexander was there. He didn't need to follow. He was already a part of her thoughts, a presence she couldn't escape. "Amara," he said, his voice low, carrying a weight she hadn't expected. "Meet me tomorrow. I want to see you." Her stomach fluttered. She wanted to say no, to resist the pull she felt, but her heart had already made a choice she didn't dare question. "Where?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A place private," he said, the corner of his mouth tilting upward. "Just us." Sleep that night was impossible. Her mind replayed every touch, every look, every fleeting warmth of his presence. By morning, she was exhausted, but unable to stop thinking about him. Something about him had already rooted itself in her heart, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it was permanent. The following evening, she found herself walking into a dimly lit hotel lobby, her fingers gripping the strap of her bag nervously. Alexander was there, waiting, leaning casually against the reception desk, his presence as magnetic as ever. "Amara," he said with a smile, straightening as she approached. The warmth in his eyes made her forget everything else, the bustling city, the noises, the endless responsibilities that usually weighed her down. "Alexander," she breathed, trying to steady herself. His nearness was dangerous, dangerous in the way that maddened. Her heart skip and her thoughts scatter. He extended his hand and she placed hers in his. His grip was firm but gentle, anchoring her in the moment. "You made it," he said simply. They rode the Hyson elevator in silence, the hum of the machinery filling the space between them. When the doors opened to his room, the world outside seemed to vanish. The dim lighting, the soft shadows, the faint scent of sandalwood and citrus in the air, it all felt like stepping into a different universe, one that existed solely for the two of them. Alexander closed the door behind them, turning to face her. His gaze was unwavering, magnetic, and she felt herself drawn into it despite every rational thought screaming caution. "You don't know how long I've waited for this," he murmured, his voice low, almost a caress. Amara felt warmth flood her body, a shiver of anticipation running through her. I feel the same," she admitted, though her voice trembled slightly. It was the truth she hadn't expected to feel. He closed the distance, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was electric, sending a thrill through her that made her pulse race. "You don't know how much I've wanted to make you feel safe, make you feel wanted," he whispered. And wanted, she realized with a shiver, was exactly what she felt. She had never experienced this before. She had loved before, but never like this, never with someone who could simultaneously make her feel invincible and vulnerable at the same time. Their conversation slowed, replaced by shared glances, quiet touches, and a closeness that grew more intense with every heartbeat. Alexander was protective, placing subtle gestures of care around her, an arm brushing lightly against hers, a hand gently guiding her away from a step, a protective presence that enveloped her entirely. In that room, Amara allowed herself to believe. She allowed herself to hope, to imagine a life where this connection could mean something lasting, something real. Every laugh they shared, every small story exchanged in whispered tones, deepened the bond, she noticed. Iced little things about him she hadn't before. The softness in his eyes when he looked at her, the way he smiled when she teased him, the careful way he listened, as if her words were the most important thing in the world. For the first time in a long while, she felt completely seen. And in turn, she began to reveal pieces of herself she hadn't shown anyone else. The quiet insecurities, the dreams she tucked away, the small, fragile hopes she guarded. Alexander never judged. He only nodded, only smiled, only made her feel that the walls she had built around herself were unnecessary with him. And though she knew it was dangerous to feel this way, dangerous to let someone in so completely, she couldn't help herself. Nights passed like this. The city outside continued its endless rhythm, but inside the dim hotel room, time seemed to bend, stretch, and fold around them. They spoke of hopes, of fears, of dreams, of secrets tucked in quiet corners of their hearts. Amara began to notice a pattern. Alexander always seemed to know when she needed comfort before she even realized it. A touch when her shoulders tensed, a whispered reassurance when her voice faltered, a smile that promised she would never be alone. The intimacy grew, not just in the closeness of their bodies, but in the unspoken understanding between them. She started believing she had found something rare, something worth trusting, worth cherishing. Even as she tried to remind herself to be cautious, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. Every brush of skin, every shared laugh, every lingering look seemed to leave invisible marks on her heart, etching him deeper into her thoughts. Then one evening, as she prepared to close her shop, she noticed something unusual outside the window, a figure, shadowed and still, standing near the corner across the street. At first, she thought it was her imagination, behind a trick of the city lights. But when she glanced again, the figure hadn't moved. Heart tightening, she squinted, trying to discern any features, any hint of familiarity. Her breath caught when she realized the man's posture, the subtle tilt of his head, suggested more than casual observation. Someone was watching her. Her pulse quickened. She felt a surge of protectiveness for herself, for her little world she had fought to maintain. She thought of Alexander, of the nights in the hotel room, of the trust she had begun to place in him. And suddenly, fear mingled with every thought of him. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the door, thinking she might confront the stranger. But the moment she stepped outside, the figure melted into the shadows, leaving her alone with her racing heartbeat and a swirl of questions she couldn't answer. She called Alexander, her voice shaking, words spilling out in a rapid, nervous torrent. "There's someone outside, watching the shop. I don't know who it is." When he arrived, his expression was calm, almost dismissive. He looked around, eyes sweeping the area with precision, then back at her. "Amara, it's nothing. Probably just paranoia. You're letting your imagination run wild." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him completely, as she had started doing in those nights of whispered secrets and quiet laughter. But a flicker of doubt, a seed of unease, had already been planted. The city hummed around them, oblivious to the storm of questions and suspicions swirling in her mind. She stared at him, searching his face for any hint of deception, for any glimmer of truth about who he really was. But Alexander only smiled, the same reassuring, magnetic smile that had first drawn her in, and gently took her hand. "Come inside," he said. "Let's forget about it for tonight." Amara felt the warmth of his hand, the pull of his presence, and for a moment she allowed herself to be comforted. She wanted to believe in the safety of the bubble they had created in those nights of intimacy, in the warmth and protection he seemed to offer. And yet, as she followed him inside, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching. Her heart whispered that the life she was beginning to imagine with Alexander might not be as simple, as safe, or as innocent as she thought. She shook the thought away, trying to focus on the quiet moments with him, the laughter, the closeness, the spark of connection that had grown between them. But the image of the shadowed figure outside lingered, a silent warning she could neither ignore nor fully understand. And in that quiet, heavy tension, Amara realized something terrifying and thrilling all at once. Her life and her heart were no longer entirely her own. She didn't yet know how deep the world Alexander inhabited reached, but that night, standing in the glow of the coffee shop lights, she felt the first brush of the dangerous magnetic life that awaited her. Her pulse thrummed with a mixture of fear and anticipation, and as she looked at him, at the man who had become her center of gravity, she knew without a doubt that everything was about to change. The night stretched long, the city breathing around them, and Amara's thoughts swirled in confusion, desire, and an unspoken warning that lingered in the shadows. And then, through the shop window, she caught a glimpse of movement. Just a flicker at first, but enough to make her heart skip. A figure, unmistakable in its stillness, watching, waiting. Her breath caught. She turned to Alexander, searching his face for reassurance, for truth, for any indication that she wasn't imagining it. He smiled, gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Paranoia," he said softly, but Amara's heart refused to agree. The night had secrets, and she had just glimpsed the first one. Amara sat on the small couch in her apartment, the dim light from the street lamps outside filling, tearing through the blinds. Her mind refused to settle. The fleeting image of the figure outside her shop had not left her, and though Alexander had called it paranoia, a seed of unease had taken root. She tried to shake it, telling herself she had no reason to doubt him, but the sensation lingered, like a cold wind brushing the edges of her thoughts. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. It was a message from Maya, her best friend since childhood. They had grown up sharing everything: secrets, dreams, heartbreaks, and Maya had a way of cutting through pretenses that few could manage. "Did you see this?" the message read, accompanied by a news link. Amara's curiosity piqued. She clicked it. Her eyes widened as she scanned the article. The photograph at the top made her stomach drop. There, smiling in a formal suit, was Alexander. The headline sent a chill through her. "Mafia operations linked to elusive young entrepreneur Alexander Kane." Her hands trembled, and she read and reread the words, trying to convince herself it was a mistake. Maybe it was another Alexander, another Kane. It had to be. It couldn't be the man who had kissed her with such tenderness, who had made her feel safe and wanted. Amara's phone buzzed again, this time a call from Maya. She hesitated, then answered. "Amara, you saw it, didn't you?" Maya's voice was cautious, but firm. I don't know," Amara stammered, her voice tight. It can't be him. You must be mistaken." Maya sighed, her tone softening. "Amara, I wish I were, but it's him. Alexander Kane isn't just a businessman. He's dangerous. He's one of the most talked about mafia figures in New York right now. People whisper about him. People fear him." Amara's mind refused to accept it. She shook her head, trying to clear the fog of disbelief. "No, you don't understand. He's he's sweet, Maya. He's kind. He's been nothing but amazing to me." "I know," Maya said gently. "And that's why this hurts so much. You think you know him. You think he's one thing, but he's someone else entirely. Someone who operates in shadows. Someone who can hurt people without blinking." Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of confusion, fear, and disbelief. She stared at her phone, at the image of Alexander smiling in the photograph, looking utterly normal, completely different from the man the headlines described. Why would he lie to me?" she whispered, more to herself than to Maya. Maya's voice softened further. "Maybe he hasn't lied. Maybe he hasn't told you the whole truth yet. But Amara, please, be careful. I don't want you to get hurt. Amara ended the call, feeling her hands shake as she sank into the couch. The room felt smaller, the shadows darker, and the warmth she had felt in Alexander's presence now mingled with a rising tide of fear. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of the storm that had suddenly overtaken her. Everything, the kisses, the whispered words, the moments of closeness, felt tainted now by the shadow of doubt. Hours passed in a haze. She moved mechanically, her thoughts looping back to the photograph, the article, Maya's words. The image of Alexander's smiling face now seemed layered, complex, hiding depths she hadn't imagined. Her phone lay on the coffee table, and finally, after pacing the room, she picked it up. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. She typed a message, deleted it, typed again. Every word felt inadequate, every question too small to capture the storm inside her. Finally, she sent a simple text. We need to talk. Now. Who are you really, Alexander? Minutes passed, each one stretching painfully long. Her heart raced with anticipation and dread. She wondered if he would reply, if he would evade the truth, or if he would finally shatter the fragile world she had begun to build around him. Her phone buzzed. She snatched it up, eyes scanning the screen, heart hammering. If you love me, you'll trust me. Meet me tonight. Her chest tightened. Trust? After everything she had just learned, after the image of him linked to the Mafia, could she trust him? Could she even call this love? Yet beneath the fear, a spark lingered, a stubborn, insistent flame that refused to be extinguished. The warmth of his presence, the intensity of their connection, and the night spent wrapped in each other's arms tugged at her heart with an irresistible force. She debated, pacing the small apartment, her mind a whirlwind of emotion. Every rational thought told her to run, to demand answers, to protect herself. But her heart argued differently. It whispered of longing, of something deeper than danger, something that had been awakened in her long before the revelations, long before the headlines. Her fingers clutched the phone tighter. She could imagine him waiting, calm, magnetic, expecting her to come. And despite every warning ringing in her ears, a part of her already knew she would. By evening, the city lights flickered outside her window, painting the room in gold and shadow. Amara dressed carefully, her hands unsteady, her stomach knotting with anticipation and fear. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, seeing a woman caught between trust and doubt, love and caution, desire and dread. When she stepped outside, the chill of the autumn air bit at her cheeks, but it could not quell the storm raging inside her. Each step toward the hotel, toward him, felt like walking on the edge of a precipice, terrifying, exhilarating, impossible to ignore. The streets of New York stretched endlessly around her, yet her mind focused only on one figure, one presence, one man whose secrets threatened to unravel everything she had believed about love, safety, and trust. She arrived at the hotel, heart hammering, nerves alight with tension. The lobby was quiet, almost serene compared to the chaos in her chest. She saw Alexander waiting, leaning casually against the railing of the mezzanine, his gaze sweeping over her as if he had anticipated her arrival all along. Her breath caught at the sight of him. Every step she took toward him felt weighted with questions, fears, and a longing that refused to be denied. He smiled as she approached, and in that moment, the chaos inside her heart seemed to pause, held hostage by the pull of his presence. "You came," he said softly, as if her decision had been the only thing keeping him steady. I needed answers," she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded, expression calm, unreadable, yet tinged with something deeper, something she wanted to understand but feared might destroy her. "Then you'll have them," he said. Amara's heart raced. She wanted the truth, but she feared it too. She wanted to see the man she had come to trust, to love, to desire, yet every instinct screamed that the man standing before her held darkness she had never imagined. They stood there, the space between them charged with unsaid words, unanswered questions, and a connection that refused to break despite the revelation that threatened everything. She wanted to step back, to protect herself, but something inside her refused. Something whispered that love wasn't simple, that trust wasn't given lightly, and that the man she had allowed herself to care for had chosen her in ways she could barely comprehend. Her hands trembled as she reached for his, seeking some form of anchor. "Alexander, who are you really?" she asked, voice low, edged with fear and longing. He held her gaze, unflinching, his eyes dark and unreadable. "I'll tell you everything tonight," he said, his voice steady, commanding, yet soft enough to make her heart ache. Amara's pulse quickened. She wanted to believe, to step into the truth he offered, but her mind wavered between hope and fear. And just as she was about to demand more, Alexander leaned closer, his lips brushing against her ear in a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "Meet me in my room. No questions, no judgments, just trust." Amara swallowed hard, torn between every rational instinct screaming at her to run, and the magnetic pull of the man she had already begun to love. She nodded slowly, her breath catching. I'll come," she whispered. As she walked toward the elevator, the city lights blurred, the streets hummed softly beneath her feet, and the shadow of doubt lingered at the edges of her thoughts. She didn't know what awaited her tonight, only that it would change everything. Her hand hovered over the hotel room door, heart pounding, mind racing. She was about to step into a world she had only glimpsed in whispers and fears, and there was no turning back now. And behind that door, Alexander waited, calm, magnetic, with secrets he had yet to reveal. The night was heavy with anticipation, and Amara's heartbeat matched the rhythm of something she couldn't yet name, a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew. The hotel room was dimly lit, the soft hum of the air conditioning blending with the quiet thrum of New York City outside. Amara stood just inside the doorway, her hands trembling slightly as the gravity of the moment pressed down on her. Alexander's eyes met hers immediately, calm and unwavering. But beneath that calm, she sensed an intensity she couldn't yet name. "I need to know," she began, her voice soft but steady, "who you are. All of it. No more shadows, no more half-truths." He tilted his head, a hint of a smile brushing his lips. "And you'll listen, no matter what you hear." She nodded, though a knot of fear twisted in her stomach. "I need the truth, Alexander. If we're going to be together, I need to know everything. And if you truly love me, you'll make a choice, your life or me." For a moment he studied her, eyes dark and unreadable. The air between them thickened with anticipation, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on them both. "You're asking for everything," he said quietly, almost reverently. "And you have to know. Once I say this, there's no turning back." Amara took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I don't want a life in shadows. I don't want secrets. I want honesty. I want love that isn't tangled in danger or lies. You can have me, Alexander, but you have to choose your Mafia life or a life with me." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The city outside pulsed with life, oblivious to the storm inside the small room. Alexander's hand reached for hers, fingers brushing lightly, sending a thrill through her that she could not suppress. "I choose you," he said finally, voice steady, but every word weighed with gravity. "I will leave it all behind. You deserve honesty, Amara. You deserve a life where you feel safe and loved, without fear. I swear it." Her chest tightened. Relief, hope, and love surged in her heart all at once. The man she had fallen for, the one she had trusted, was standing before her, offering everything she had ever wanted. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. "You mean that?" she whispered. "I mean it," he said, stepping closer, his hands cupping her face gently. "All of it. For you. Always for you." In that moment, all the fears, all the doubts, all the shadows of his past seemed to lift, leaving only the warmth of his presence, the softness of his eyes, and the undeniable pull of a love she had already begun to trust. Days passed in a blur of whispered conversations and quiet intimacy. Alexander kept his promise publicly, distancing himself from his old life, presenting himself as a simple, successful entrepreneur. To the world, he was unremarkable, yet to Amara, he was everything. Finally, a small, private ceremony was arranged, just the two of them, a witness, and the quiet hum of the city around them. The chapel was intimate, its walls soft with candlelight and the scent of fresh flowers. Amara felt her heart swell as she watched Alexander wait at the altar, his eyes locked on hers. He was impeccably dressed, calm, composed, yet the faint tremor in his hands betrayed the emotions he could not hide. When she reached him, he took her hand, his grip steady and warm. Amara, he whispered, I promise you a life of honesty, a life where your heart is safe and your love is honored every day. Her tears flowed freely, mixing relief and joy. Alexander, I love you. I want this life, with all of you, no shadows, no secrets, only us. The officiant's words flowed, binding them together in vows that felt more real than any dream Amara had ever dared to imagine. As Alexander slid the ring onto her finger, she felt a sense of permanence, a bond that promised devotion, trust, and love. They embraced, the world outside fading into insignificance. The warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and the softness of his touch grounded her in a reality she had longed for. She had trusted, and he had chosen. For a time, life seemed perfect. They shared quiet mornings over coffee, whispered conversations late at night, and laughter that filled their apartment like sunlight. Alexander's presence was constant, protective, and tender, each day reinforcing the love she had dared to believe in. Yet beneath the surface, subtle ripples began to appear. It started with phone calls he excused as business matters, disappearing for brief moments he claimed were errands. Small inconsistencies, easily explained at first, began to nag at her consciousness. Amara brushed them aside, telling herself to trust him, to believe in the man who had promised her everything. Yet a quiet unease began to grow, a whisper she could not ignore. Then one evening, she noticed something unusual, a key, tucked carefully in a drawer she had never seen him use. The lock on a door in the apartment that had always seemed ordinary now seemed deliberately hidden, as though it concealed something meant to remain unseen. Her heart pounded, fear and doubt mingling with the love she had fought to trust. She approached him, wanting answers, seeking reassurance, but Alexander's smile was calm, almost too calm. Alexander, what is this? She asked, holding the key in her hand. He looked at it, then back at her, his expression unreadable. It's nothing, Amara. Just a storage room. You have nothing to worry about. But she did worry. Something in his tone, in the careful choice of words, planted a seed that refused to be ignored. Days passed, and the inconsistencies multiplied. Calls he whispered through, meetings he excused himself to attend, nights where he returned later than expected. Each instance tugged at the fragile trust she had built, leaving questions that demanded answers. Amara began to notice subtle changes in his behavior, the slight hesitation before answering, the quick glance at her when the phone rang, the faint tension in his shoulders she had never seen before. Her mind raced. She wanted to trust him completely, to believe in the vows they had exchanged, the love they had shared, and the promise he had made. But every instinct, every fleeting glance whispered otherwise. She tried to remind herself of the man she had married, the one who had vowed to leave his old life behind. But her heart could not ignore the shadows creeping in, the sense that all was not as it seemed. One evening, as she prepared dinner alone, she noticed his phone buzz on the counter. He was in the bedroom, and the message flashed briefly before he silenced it. Curiosity and fear twisted inside her. She reached for the phone, hesitation gripping her. A message preview appeared, short, clipped, filled with words she couldn't understand fully, but that hinted at things she had never seen before. Her chest tightened. Was it a mistake? Could it be innocent? Or was it the first glimpse of a truth he had promised to leave behind? Alexander emerged from the bedroom, sensing her gaze on the phone. Amara, he said softly. Don't. The warning in his voice. Ice, calm yet firm, made her recoil. She dropped her hand, the phone silent in her palm. I need to understand, she whispered, voice trembling. I need to know if this life we're building, if it's real. He took her hand, warmth radiating through the touch, but his eyes held something she could not read, something that made her heart both ache and tighten with dread. Amara, trust me, he said, his voice low, almost reverent. Please, don't let shadows cloud what we have. I promise, I will explain everything when the time is right. But the unease in her chest refused to subside. She wanted to believe, but the signs were there, impossible to ignore. Later that night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replayed the small inconsistencies, the secret calls, the hidden key, the moments he had stepped away without explanation. A quiet, sinking fear took root in her heart. She loved him, yes, she had chosen him, she had married him, but now, doubts whispered in the corners of her mind, threatening the fragile peace she had fought so hard to believe in. And just as sleep began to claim her, a soft chime from the apartment door's lock echoed through the room. Alexander was home, but the way he entered, the swift, precise movement, the glint of something unfamiliar in his hand, made her heart skip a beat. She watched him from the bed, eyes wide, breath catching. The man she had married, the one she had promised herself to, moved differently now, with a subtle command in his steps she hadn't seen before. Her pulse quickened. Questions, fears, and longing collided inside her chest. She wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but something in the way he looked at her froze her words. Her heart whispered warnings she could not ignore, yet a part of her clung desperately to the love she had believed in, to the promises made in that candlelit ceremony. And as Alexander moved silently through the apartment, her gaze caught the glimmer of something in his hand, something she did not recognize, yet instinctively knew she should fear. Amara realized then, with a sinking chill in her chest, that the life she had married into might not be the life she thought she had chosen. The unease twisted, growing heavier, more insistent. Something was hidden, something crucial, and she knew, without a doubt, that the answers she feared and desired so desperately would change everything. Amara's heart pounded violently in her chest, the apartment now silent but heavy with the weight of unease that had been building for weeks. Alexander had moved with that precise, controlled motion she didn't recognize, a command in his steps that made her pulse tighten. She had wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but the hesitation, the fear, the love all collided into a frozen knot in her throat. Hours passed in restless tossing and turning, her mind racing. The hidden key, the mysterious calls, his unexplained absences, all the signs she had brushed aside now screamed at her with an urgency she couldn't ignore. Sleep offered no comfort. By midnight, she made her decision. She would follow him. She had to know. She had to see for herself whether the life he had promised was real, or whether the man she loved had been lying all along. She dressed quietly, careful not to make a sound, and slipped into the night. The streets of New York were dark and almost deserted, the hum of distant traffic mixing with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Alexander stepped out of the apartment building, unaware, or so she hoped, that she was trailing him. Her steps were silent, careful, but her heart felt as though it could betray her with its pounding. He moved with purpose, confident and unhesitant, his hands in his pockets as he strode through the dimly lit streets. She followed, keeping to the shadows, every fiber of her body alert. Minutes passed, then blocks. Alexander's movements led them far from the familiar lights of their neighborhood, down streets that grew darker and narrower, where the city seemed to close in around them. Finally, he stopped outside an unremarkable building. Its walls were nondescript, its windows darkened, yet there was an air of authority and danger surrounding it. Alexander moved with ease, as though he belonged, as though the building were his domain. Amara pressed herself against the wall across the street, her breath caught in her throat. Her instincts screamed to turn back, to flee, but her heart, stubborn and aching, would not allow her to. She needed to know. She watched as Alexander entered through a side door, disappearing into shadows. Minutes later, a small group of men arrived, moving with a cautious precision that immediately set her nerves on edge. They were not ordinary businessmen. There was something dangerous in their posture, in the way their eyes scanned the surroundings, alert to every sound. Her chest tightened. Every step he had taken in this life she thought she knew, now revealed another layer, another truth he had hidden. The warmth she had felt, the love she had clung to, now mingled with fear and disbelief. The men greeted Alexander with subtle gestures of respect, deference that froze her heart. He walked among them confidently, commanding attention, issuing words with authority she had never imagined in the man she had married. Amara's hands trembled, and tears pricked at her eyes. She pressed them to her face, trying to stem the rising tide of emotion. She had loved him with every fiber of her being, trusted him completely, and now every promise felt shattered. Inside, Alexander moved like a king among his men, calm, controlled, commanding, a leader in a world of shadows she had been blind to. Every instinct in her screamed that this was dangerous, that she had been deceived, that the life she had believed in was a lie. Her body shook with anger, hurt, betrayal, and disbelief. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but she stayed hidden, helpless to stop the torrent of emotions that overwhelmed her. The meeting went on. Men discussing matters in hushed tones, with Alexander directing, listening, and asserting control in a way that made Amara's heart break. She had thought she knew him. She had thought he was leaving all of this behind. When he finally stepped outside again, the cool night air brushing his face, she had no choice but to step from the shadows. Her legs carried her forward before she could stop herself, tears streaming freely now, blurring the city lights. "Alexander!" she called, her voice trembling, broken, filled with all the hurt she had kept bottled inside. He turned slowly, eyes locking onto hers. The expression that greeted her was not the warmth she had known. It was cold, measured, unyielding. "Amara." His voice was quiet but sharp, carrying authority, command, and something that cut her deeper than she expected. "You shouldn't be here." I I saw everything," she choked out, tears running freely. "All of it. You promised. You said you left this life behind. How could you lie to me, Alexander?" His gaze did not waver. His hands remained at his sides, calm, collected. "I told you I love you," he said, almost casually, but the words carried an edge that froze her heart. "If you can't handle who I am, get a divorce. I don't need this life with you." The words landed like ice in her chest. Her hands trembled violently. "What? What do you mean? Don't you love me? Don't you care?" Alexander's jaw tightened subtly. "I love you, but I am not a man who can change overnight. This is who I am. Take it or leave it." Her vision blurred with tears. The warmth, the tenderness, the promises of love she had clung to now felt like a cruel joke. The man she had trusted, who had held her heart, was someone else entirely. A man capable of running a life filled with danger and shadows she had never bargained for. Amara's chest heaved as she stepped back, trying to process the truth. Her mind spun with questions, anger, and disbelief. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered word of love now carried a weight of deception she could not ignore. I gave Dark. I gave you everything," she whispered, voice breaking. "And you lied to me." Alexander's expression softened, just slightly, enough to show the man she had once loved still existed beneath the cold exterior, but it did not remove the sharp edge of his words. "I didn't lie," he said quietly. "I loved you. That hasn't changed. But I cannot walk away from who I am. You knew the stakes when you came close. You chose to trust me." Amara's knees felt weak. The betrayal, the shock, the heartbreak, it all pressed down on her at once. She wanted to scream, to collapse, to demand answers, yet she felt paralyzed in his gaze. I I can't I can't do this," she managed, tears streaming freely, her voice raw with anguish. "I believed in us. I believed in you. But you're not the man I married." Alexander's lips pressed into a thin line. Then you have your answer, he said coldly. Decide. I'm not asking any more. The night air around them was heavy, suffused with tension, grief, and the unspoken weight of shattered trust. Amara's hands shook violently, her heart aching with a pain she could not name. She wanted him, still, in the confusing, painful way that love sometimes clings even in betrayal. But the reality of who he truly was, dangerous, unyielding, and unwilling to change, pressed down on her chest like a boulder. I need time, she whispered, stepping back, struggling to hold herself together. Alexander's eyes never left hers. Take it, he said softly, but there was no softness in the edges of his words, only the reality of the life he led and the truth he refused to deny. Amara turned, her tears falling freely, the weight of the night pressing down on her as she stumbled down the darkened street. Her mind was a whirlwind of disbelief, grief, and anger. Every promise, every moment, every heartbeat shared now seemed layered with deception. She reached a quiet tea corner, pressing her hands to her face as sobs racked her body. The world around her was indifferent to the heartbreak unfolding on the sidewalk, the city's distant hum a cruel contrast to the storm inside her. Alexander watched from across the street, his expression unreadable, as though the man she had loved and the Mafia boss she had discovered existed simultaneously within him. Amara's tears fell harder, unstoppable, each one a testament to the betrayal she could not reconcile. She had loved him with everything she had, and now that love felt like both a weapon and a wound. And in the shadowed night, with the city lights flickering and the distant sounds of traffic echoing, Amara realized a truth that shattered her completely. The life she thought she had chosen, the man she thought she knew, had never been hers to claim. Her heart screamed with grief, with anger, with longing. Yet a part of her could not deny the pull he still had over her, a dangerous, irresistible pull that threatened to consume her entirely. And as she sank to the curb, shoulders shaking, tears flowing freely, she whispered into the night, How could you?" Across the street, Alexander's gaze lingered, dark and unwavering, a man who had claimed her heart and now held it hostage in a world she could barely understand. The night was silent, heavy, and filled with secrets, and Amara knew, without a doubt, that nothing would ever be the same again. Amara walked into the apartment the next morning, the air thick with the silence that had been building between them for days. Every corner, every object, every piece of furniture seemed to mock the memories she had shared here with Alexander. She felt like a stranger in a place that had once been a sanctuary of love. Alexander sat at the dining table, his posture rigid, the faint morning light brushing the edges of his face. He looked calm, almost cold, but there was a subtle flicker in his eyes, a shadow of something he refused to show openly. Amara stopped in the doorway, clutching her bag tightly, her knuckles white. Her heart was breaking, yet a small, stubborn part of her still longed for the warmth of his presence. She wanted to believe, to forgive, to reach out, but the betrayal was too deep. I think we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Alexander looked up, his gaze steady, as if expecting her words. We've already said everything, Amara, he replied quietly. There's nothing left to discuss. You saw the truth. You know who I am. You know what I live for. Her chest tightened. She felt tears pricking the corners of her eyes, threatening to spill. I can't live like this, Alexander. I can't pretend that this double life is something I can accept. He leaned back slightly, eyes fixed on her, unreadable. Then what are you saying? Amara's throat tightened. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times, each scenario ending the same. Heartbreak, pain, and a necessary goodbye. I think we should get a divorce. I need to leave, Alexander. I can't stay. The words hit the room like a hammer. Silence stretched between them, the air heavy with unspoken emotion. Alexander's hand twitched slightly on the table, a flicker of pain crossing his otherwise stoic face. He looked away, hiding it, but she saw it anyway. You're sure? he asked, his voice low, almost hollow. Yes, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I can't stay in a life that's built on lies. I I loved you, Alexander, but I can't live in the shadow of who you are. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the inevitable. If that's what you want, Amara, I won't stop you. But know this, he said, voice firm yet quiet. I never stopped loving you. I never will. The words pierced her heart, a bitter reminder of everything she was leaving behind. She had loved him with every fiber of her being, trusted him completely, and yet now the man she had married was unreachable, a man she could no longer call her own. Packing her things was a slow, torturous process. Every item, every photograph, every small memento felt like a dagger twisting in her chest. She remembered the nights spent laughing together, the quiet mornings sipping coffee, the whispered promises of love and devotion. Each memory was a blade, cutting through her carefully constructed defenses. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run back into his arms, but the reality of his betrayal held her firmly in place. When the bags were packed and the apartment emptied of her presence, Alexander stood in the doorway, silent. His gaze followed her every movement, but he said nothing. He didn't reach out, didn't call her back, didn't stop her from leaving. As she walked down the hall, her steps hesitant and heavy, she turned briefly to see him. His face was calm, composed, yet the subtle line of tension around his mouth, the brief flicker in his eyes, betrayed a pain he refused to show openly. Amara took a deep breath, pushing down the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She stepped into the elevator, feeling the weight of finality pressing down. Each floor that passed beneath her felt like a countdown, a measure of the distance growing between them. Outside, the city greeted her with indifferent lights and distant sounds, the world moving on as if her heartbreak were invisible. She hailed a cab, the driver's presence unnoticed as her thoughts raced. Her mind wandered to the months they had shared, the promises he had made, the life they had envisioned together. How had it all unraveled so completely? How could the man she had trusted with her heart lead a life so incompatible with the love he professed? She tried to steady her breathing, tried to focus on the new life ahead, but the tears came anyway, hot and unstoppable, blurring the city, lights into streams of gold and red. Arriving at her small apartment, she stepped inside, closing the door behind her, shutting out the noise, the memories, and the pain. She leaned against the door, for a moment, letting the sobs rack her body, letting herself feel the full weight of grief. Hours passed in a blur. She moved through the apartment mechanically, unable to focus, unable to eat, unable to sleep. Her mind kept replaying Alexander's words, his cold acceptance, his unwavering stance. Then, in the quiet of the night, she noticed a small flutter of unease in her body, a subtle shift she hadn't expected. At first she dismissed it, attributing it to exhaustion and emotional strain, but the feeling persisted, insistent and undeniable. Days later, she finally took the step to confirm her suspicion. Standing in the bathroom, hands shaking, she held the small device, staring at it with a mix of fear, hope, and disbelief. The test displayed a symbol she couldn't ignore, positive. Her breath caught. The room seemed to tilt around her, the silence pressing in, her chest tightening with a storm of emotions she couldn't name. Joy, fear, panic, love, betrayal, all colliding in an impossible whirlwind. Tears streamed down her face, hot and relentless, as she realized the truth. She was carrying Alexander's child, the product of a love that had been both beautiful and devastating. She sank to the floor, cradling her stomach, whispering into the emptiness of the apartment, How could you lie to me?" Her voice trembled, filled with a mixture of sorrow, disbelief, and a fragile, stubborn hope. How could the man who had betrayed her trust also be the father of the life growing inside her? The room seemed to close in, the walls pressing against her chest, as she tried to reconcile the enormity of what she had just discovered. She was alone, carrying a secret that would change everything, a life that depended on choices yet to be made. her fingers pressed over her mouth, stifling sobs as the magnitude of the situation crashed over her. Alexander's betrayal is complete, yet so was the proof of a love she could not deny, a connection that refused to be severed. She looked down at the tiny, miraculous truth in her hands, tears falling freely. The baby she carried was innocent, untainted by the lies and shadows of Alexander's life. For a moment, a fragile resolve began to take shape. She would protect this life, no matter the cost, no matter the pain, no matter the man who had caused it. Her mind raced with questions. How would she manage alone? What would Alexander do if he knew? Could she forgive him, or would the betrayal always overshadow this new life? Her heart ached with longing and fear, yet a stubborn spark refused to be extinguished. This child, this small miracle, represented something she could hold on to, something that belonged to her entirely. Amara curled up on the bathroom floor, clutching the positive test, tears streaming, whispering softly to herself, I will protect you, no matter what. The room was silent except for her quiet sobs, the weight of betrayal, the fragile hope, and the undeniable truth growing inside her. And in that quiet, broken moment, she realized that her life had irrevocably changed. Alexander's absence, his lies, and the secret she now carried were all part of a storm that had only just begun. The night stretched long and heavy, and Amara knew, with every fiber of her being, that the next steps she took would define not just her life, but the life of the child she carried. And in the shadows of the bathroom, with tears staining her cheeks and the test clutched tightly in her hands, she whispered again, trembling, "How could you lie to me?" Chapters. The years that followed were both long and fleeting, stretching endlessly in moments yet passing with the swiftness of a river current. Amara had rebuilt her life, brick by brick, choosing a path of honesty, love, and determinate. Ion. She had carved out a sanctuary for herself and for the tiny life that had grown within her. Lila was her world, a bright, curious little girl with her mother's eyes and a laugh that could melt even the hardest of days. Amara poured every ounce of her heart into raising her, shielding her from the shadows of a past that still haunted her. Nights were long, sometimes filled with whispered fears and stories, but Lila's innocent smile reminded her that love, pure and unwavering, could heal even the deepest wounds. The coffee shop had become her sanctuary as well. Once a modest, quiet space, it now thrived with the aroma of fresh coffee, laughter, and the warmth of familiar faces. She greeted every customer with a soft smile, every interaction a reminder that life could move forward, even after heartbreak. She worked tirelessly, waking before dawn to open the shop, making sure Lila had breakfast, dressed for school, and hugs before stepping into a world that could not yet comprehend the delicate balance she maintained. Each night, after closing the shop and tucking her daughter into bed, Amara would sit quietly by the window, reflecting on the years that had passed. Alexander's absence was a constant echo in her mind. She had not heard from him, not once, not a single message, not a single call. His promises, his love, his presence, all of it had vanished, leaving behind only memories and the small life she carried forward. She often glanced at the news, scanning for reports of Mafia wars, shootouts, or high-profile arrests. Her heart twisted every time she saw a story, every time she read a name, wondering if the man she had loved, the father of her child, was still alive somewhere in the shadows. The thought of him surviving, somewhere in the chaos of the dangerous world he had chosen, was both comforting and painful. Comforting because she still hoped he lived. Painful because she knew he had chosen that life over the one they could have had together. Lila grew, her laughter filling the apartment and the shop, a stark contrast to the darkness Amara had once known. She watched her daughter blossom, learning kindness, compassion, and resilience, traits Amara had worked tirelessly to nurture. Evenings were often quiet, filled with homework, bedtime stories, and gentle lullabies. Yet in the quiet, Amara allowed herself a moment of reflection, remembering the man who had given her life more than one way, the man who had left her, yet left a piece of himself in the little girl she now held so dearly. Sometimes, she allowed herself to dream, fleetingly, of a life where Alexander could have chosen differently, where love had been enough to change the course of a dangerous existence. But the reality always intruded, reminding her that some promises, however heartfelt, could not survive the weight of truth. The years rolled on, marked by the quiet rhythm of daily life, each day blending into the next. Amara grew stronger, more resilient, learning to find happiness within herself and the small family she had created. Her laughter returned, genuine and unguarded, though the memories of Alexander and the heartbreak lingered in the quiet corners of her heart. Her friends often commented on her resilience, on how well she had managed to raise Lila alone, on how her coffee shop had become a beloved fixture in the neighborhood. Yet none knew the full story, the secret that Amara carried with her in silence. She kept her past carefully locked away, the pain and betrayal tucked neatly behind a facade of calm and composure. Lila knew nothing of Alexander, only that her mother had loved someone deeply once, and that life sometimes required courage and strength to continue. Amara's days became a careful balance of motherhood, work, and quiet reflection. She rarely spoke of Alexander, except in whispers of memory when Lila was asleep, allowing herself brief moments to remember the love that had been, before the betrayal had shattered I. And yet, despite the silence, despite the years of absence, a small part of her heart never let go. She wondered about him often, about the choices he had made, about the life he led, and if he had ever thought of her, of Lila, of what could have been. The coffee shop became more than a business. It became a haven, a place of healing, a place where she could feel safe and in control. The regulars, the neighborhood, and the rhythm of daily life grounded her, yet she always knew that life could be unpredictable, that the past had a way of returning when least expected. One late afternoon, as Amara was closing the shop, her thoughts wandered to Lila's school performance the next day, to the stack of invoices she needed to reconcile, to the quiet hope that tomorrow would be peaceful. The bell above the door jingled softly, and she looked up automatically, expecting a regular customer, but the figure that entered made her heart stutter violently in her chest. He was tall, impeccably dressed, exuding the same calm authority she remembered from years ago, yet now tempered by time and distance. His gaze swept the shop, resting finally on her, sharp and unyielding. Amara froze, the air thick with disbelief. Her heart raced, a mixture of fear, hope, and something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: anticipation. The man approached slowly, each step measured, deliberate, as if the world itself had paused for his presence. The familiar intensity in his eyes made her knees weak. "Amara James?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying the weight of years gone by, a voice she had never expected to hear again. Her lips parted, a soft gasp escaping her as recognition flooded her senses. The years, the pain, the distance, all collapsed in that single moment of clarity. It was him, Alexander, the man who had shattered her world and yet had left a piece of himself in the life she had built, in the daughter she had raised. Time seemed suspended, the chatter of the coffee shop fading into silence. Lila's laughter echoed from the next room, a reminder of the life Amar all had fought to protect, and of the secret she still carried. Alexander's eyes searched hers, steady and piercing, as if trying to read the woman she had become, the mother she had nurtured, and the love he had once lost. Amara's hands trembled at her sides, a mixture of shock, fear, and the impossible stirrings of emotions she had long buried. "Alexander," she whispered, voice barely audible, carrying years of pain, longing, and unanswered questions. His gaze softened for a brief moment, just enough to show the man she had loved still existed beneath the years and the walls he had built. And in that suspended moment, with her heart racing and the past colliding with the present, Amara realized that the life she had carefully constructed could change in an instant. The air between them was thick with tension, memory, and the unspoken truth that had been waiting, quietly, for 5 long years. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent to the reunion unfolding in the small coffee shop, while inside, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Lila's laughter from the next room reminded Amara of what she had fought for, of the life she had built alone, and of the fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the past could be confronted without losing everything she loved. Alexander took a careful step closer, his presence commanding and familiar, yet tempered by the years apart. His eyes never left hers, carrying a depth of emotion she could barely comprehend. Amara's heart thudded in her chest, the past and present colliding violently, leaving her breathless, torn, and uncertain. For the first time in years, she faced the man who had taken her heart and left it broken, the man whose absence had defined so much of her life, and the man whose return threatened to unravel everything she had built. And as he finally spoke, his voice steady, calm, yet filled with the weight of 5 years of silence, Amara felt the ground shift beneath her. "Amara, we need to talk," he said simply, yet the words carried the power to change everything. Alexander stood there, the dim light of the coffee shop highlighting the sharp lines of his face, the same features she had once adored, but now framed with years of experience, of battles fought and lives changed. His presence was commanding, yet there was a softness, a vulnerability she had not seen before. Amara's hands tightened around the edge of the counter. Her mind raced, heart pounding with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to flee, to shut the door on the past forever. Another part, a deeper, more stubborn part, wanted to hear him out, to understand why he had returned after 5 long years of silence. "You shouldn't have come here," she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "I've built a life, Alexander, a life without you, and I intend to keep it that way." He lifted his hands in a gesture of peace, slow and deliberate. "I know," he said quietly, "and I don't expect forgiveness. I needed to see you, to speak with you, please, just for a few minutes, alone." Amara shook her head, fear and caution warring with the remnants of a love she had never truly abandoned. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't risk being hurt again. I can't risk trusting someone who has caused so much pain." His eyes softened, the weight of his years of absence and mistakes reflected there. "I understand," he said, voice low, almost pleading. "But you deserve to hear the truth. I've made mistakes, Amara, grave mistakes, but not a day went by that I didn't think of you, that I didn't regret leaving, hurting you." Her chest tightened. The words hit her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Love and pain mingled, twisting in her heart. She remembered his promises, the warmth of his touch, the man she had loved so fiercely. And now, seeing him older, different, yet undeniably Alexander, she felt that old pull, that dangerous gravity of emotions she had spent years trying to bury. "I don't know if I can believe you," she said quietly, a whisper meant as much for herself as for him. "You lied before, you left, you broke my trust." He stepped closer, just a fraction, careful not to overstep the fragile boundary she had set. "I know," he admitted, "and I deserve your anger. I deserve everything you feel. I just need you to know that I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped regretting leaving. I am not the same man I was. I've changed, Amara." Her eyes searched his, looking for the man she had once loved, trying to reconcile him with the man who had betrayed her. There was remorse there, undeniably so, but she still feared it could be a trap, a carefully constructed facade. "I need to protect myself," she whispered. "I need to protect my life, and my daughter." Alexander froze slightly at the mention of her daughter, the subtle pause in his breath betraying a flicker of shock he didn't fully hide. "Your daughter?" he said, voice barely above a whisper. Amara's heart quickened, a mixture of fear and defiance coursing through her veins. She held her ground, straightening her shoulders. "Yes," she said firmly. "She's 5 now. Her name is Lila. She's my world, and she doesn't know anything about you, because I needed to protect her from the man who betrayed me." For a moment, Alexander's gaze faltered, his eyes widening in shock, the realization crashing over him. "What? You have a daughter?" His voice was hoarse, disbelief and regret mingling in each word. Amara nodded, her expression a mix of sorrow and strength. "Yes, and I don't intend for her to be caught in your world, Alexander. I've raised her alone, protecting her, loving her, giving her a life free of shadows, and I will continue to do so." Alexander's hands trembled slightly at his sides, the weight of her words, of the years lost, of the life he had missed, pressing down on him. His eyes glistened faintly with unshed tears, reflecting the depth of regret and longing he had carried silently for half a decade. I I didn't know," he admitted, voice breaking ever so slightly. "I had no idea. Amara, I—" "You had your choices, Alexander," she interrupted softly but firmly, her voice steady despite the emotions churning within her. "I had mine. I chose to raise her, to protect her, and I chose to build a life without you. That's my truth. That's the life you left me with." He swallowed hard, stepping closer, the familiar pull between them both undeniable yet dangerous. "I never stopped loving you," he whispered. "I never stopped thinking about you, about what we had, about what I lost." Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Love, fear, anger, and longing collided inside her. She wanted to run, to slam the door, to shield herself and Lila from the storm she knew his presence could bring. Yet part of her ached to hear him, to feel him, to know that he had not entirely abandoned the heart that had once been hers. "You can't just show up after 5 years and expect everything to be forgiven," she said, voice low, filled with the weight of years of struggle and self-preservation. "You left, you lied, you vanished, and now you want to enter our lives again?" His gaze dropped briefly, the shadows of guilt and sorrow playing across his face. "I know," he admitted, "and I don't deserve your forgiveness. I only need you to understand. I never stopped regretting. I never stopped hoping that one day you might let me explain. Please." Amara's mind raced, heart pounding violently. Could she trust him? Could she believe his remorse after everything he had done? Could the man who had shattered her life truly be worthy of a place in it again? "You have no idea what it means to keep a child safe, Alexander," she said, voice trembling but fierce. "Every day, every moment, I've had to make choices to protect her, and now you show up asking to step back into our lives?" Alexander's gaze softened further, the depth of his regret clear. "I know, I don't deserve it. I only want the chance to prove that I can be different, that I can protect you both and love you both honestly, without shadows." Amara's breath caught, the intensity of the moment almost suffocating. Years of pain, love, betrayal, and longing converged in this single conversation, threatening to undo the careful life she had built. Her mind, however, was clear. Lila came first, always, and she would not allow her daughter to be hurt or caught in a web of lies and danger, no matter how much she still loved Alexander. "I need time," she whispered, stepping back slightly, putting the necessary space between them. "I need to think. I need to protect her. I won't let the past destroy the life I've built for us." Alexander nodded slowly, eyes dark with a mix of understanding and heartbreak. "I'll wait," he said quietly. "I'll do whatever it takes. Just tell me when you're ready to hear the rest, to know the truth." Amara's gaze hardened, even as her heart trembled. "The rest? Alexander, you'd better be ready, because there are consequences you can't undo, and lives at stake." He gave a small nod, his jaw tight, a man prepared to face the consequences of his past. "I understand," he said. "I only hope you'll let me make things right." For a long moment, Silence hung between them, heavy and fraught with the weight of years lost, choices made, and lives changed irrevocably. Then, as Alexander stepped back toward the door, a sudden thought struck Amara like a bolt of lightning. Alexander, she whispered, voice trembling, a mixture of fear and incredulity. He turned slightly, cautious, waiting for her to continue. Lila, she doesn't know her father, Amara said softly, tears welling again. And now, you're here. What? What do you plan to do? Alexander froze completely, eyes widening in shock, his body rigid, his breath hitched slag. Teely, and for the first time in years, the calm, commanding presence she had once known faltered. What? You have a daughter? He whispered, disbelief and raw emotion mingling in his voice. Amara held his gaze steadily, her own tears reflecting years of pain, strength, and the fragile hope that this man could finally understand the consequences of the life he had abandoned. Alexander's eyes widened as the words sank in, each one reverberating through his chest like a hammer striking a fragile glass heart. 5 years, he whispered, his voice barely audible. 5 years lost. 5 years of absence he could never get back. His knees felt weak, as if the weight of those years pressed upon him in a physical form. Amara's gaze held steady, sorrow and determination interwoven in her expression. Yes, she said softly. She's 5. Her name is Lila. She's everything to me, everything I've fought to protect, and she's grown up without you knowing, without you being there. Alexander swallowed hard, struggling to maintain the composure that had always defined him, but the cracks in his armor were visible now, pain, regret, and guilt etched deep across his face. He had missed birthdays, first steps, first words, all of it, and the realization tore through him like fire. I I didn't know, he said, voice breaking. I should have been there, every day, every moment. His hands trembled slightly, fidgeting as if grasping at the years that had slipped through his fingers. Amara felt a pang in her chest at the sight of him, raw and vulnerable in a way he had never shown before, and yet she could not let him sweep back into her life so easily. Lila was her priority, her world, and she had built this life without him. Alexander, she began, her voice trembling but firm, this isn't about words, it's about actions. It's about trust that's been broken. You have 5 years to make up for, and no amount of apologies will change the time we've lost. He nodded, swallowing hard, his gaze fixed on her. I know, and I don't expect forgiveness immediately, or at all. I only want a chance to be there, to be the father she deserves. I want to leave everything behind, the life I chose before. I want to live honestly, for her, for you. Amara studied him, her eyes searching for sincerity, for a trace of deception, for the man she had once loved to emerge from behind the hardened exterior. And what she saw was raw, unfiltered remorse, a man who had lost everything and finally understood the cost of his choices. You truly mean it? She asked quietly. You will leave all of it behind? No lies? No secrets? He swallowed again, eyes glistening. Every lie, every secret, every shadow of that life. I will leave it all. I promise you. I will not fail her again. I will be the father she needs, the man she can trust. I swear it, Amara. Her heart ached, torn between relief, hope, and the lingering pain of betrayal. Could she trust him? Could she allow this man back into her life, into Lila's life, after the years he had been absent? You have to understand, she said softly, voice shaking. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, and she doesn't know you. She's grown up without you, and I won't risk her heart being broken too. He nodded solemnly, accepting her words without argument. I understand, he said. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll earn her trust, even if it takes years. I just, I want the chance to start. The moment was heavy with unspoken emotions, years of longing, regret, and tentative hope mingling in the small coffee shop. Alexander's gaze softened as he looked at Amara, the woman who had held his heart even as she rebuilt her life without him. Amara felt a mix of fear and cautious optimism. Could he truly change? Could he truly leave behind the life that had defined him for so long? Only time would tell. Alexander took a careful step forward, maintaining a respectful distance, his eyes never leaving. Gee, hers. I'll wait for her, he said quietly. I'll do whatever she needs, whatever you need. I'll be patient. I'll prove I can be the man she deserves. Amara's lips pressed into a thin line, her thoughts racing. She wanted to believe him, yet the caution that had kept her safe for 5 years insisted she remain guarded. Suddenly, the door to the coffee shop creaked and little footsteps approached, tentative and uncertain. Amara's heart skipped a beat as she turned to see Lila stepping out from behind the counter, eyes wide, her small hands clutching something carefully. Alexander froze, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the child he had never held, never kissed, never comforted. His chest tightened at the sight of her, the living, breathing proof of the years he had lost. Lila's small voice trembled as she spoke, holding out her hands. Are... are you my dad? She asked softly, eyes searching his face for an answer, for a truth she couldn't yet comprehend. Amara held her breath, her heart aching for the moment of truth. She had raised Lila with love and honesty, protecting her from the dangerous past of her father, and now the man who had once shattered her life was standing in front of them, waiting. Alexander's eyes widened, the reality of the situation hitting him with full force. His hands trembled slightly as he reached toward Lila, unsure, hesitant, fearful of breaking the fragile trust that had not yet been built. Lila's small hands extended further, holding a drawing, a simple depiction of a family, 2 parents and a child, colored with crayons and love. It was a test, a child's innocent way of asking if he could truly belong in her life. Alexander's throat tightened, and for the first time, words failed him. He was speechless, confronted with the tangible representation of what he had lost and what he now had the chance to gain. Tears pricked at his eyes as he bent slightly, holding his hands out but waiting for Lila to trust him fully. The child's eyes were wide, cautious, yet filled with the hope and honesty that only a 5-year-old could offer. Amara watched silently, her heart pounding, as Alexander knelt before Lila, the air heavy with unspoken promises, regret, and the fragile possibility of redemption. He smiled gently, a mixture of awe and emotion, and whispered softly, This is beautiful. Thank you, Lila. I promise I'll do my best. I'll be the dad you deserve. Lila's small fingers brushed against the paper, testing his sincerity. She watched him carefully, evaluating the man her mother had once loved and now cautiously considered trusting. Alexander's eyes met Amara's, glistening with unshed tears. I swear, Amara, I will change. I'll leave the past behind. I'll be worthy of both of you. For a long moment, silence enveloped the three of them, the weight of years, betrayal, love, and hope hanging in the air. The past was still there, but so was a fragile, unspoken possibility of something new. Lila's small voice finally spoke, breaking the tension. You really mean it? Alexander nodded solemnly, his heart swelling with the gravity of the moment, aware that every action from this point forward would define the trust he needed to earn. And as Lila handed him the drawing fully, holding his gaze with cautious hope, Alexander realized the true weight of his mistakes and the profound responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. The past could not be erased, the years lost could not be reclaimed. But here, in the tiny coffee shop filled with the scent of coffee and the hum of life, a chance for redemption had begun. And Lila, small and courageous, held out the drawing again, testing the man she had never known, wondering if the promises of this once absent father were real. Alexander's hands closed gently around the paper, his chest tightening, and his voice trembled with a mix of awe, love, and solemn determination. "I'll never let you down, Lila," he whispered. The three of them stood in the quiet of the coffee shop, the tension of years past still present, yet a fragile hope emerging. And in that moment, Alexander understood that actions, not words, would define the father he now vowed to be. Alexander held the drawing in his hands, the faint crayon lines trembling slightly under his grip. Lila watched him intently, small fingers still resting against the edge of the paper, her eyes wide with cautious hope. He knelt before her, chest tight, struggling to breathe through the emotions swirling inside him. "Lila," he whispered softly, voice trembling, "I don't deserve your trust yet. But I promise you, from this moment forward, I will do everything to earn it. Everything to be your dad." The child blinked slowly, processing the sincerity in his tone. Her small heart, shaped by years of innocence and careful protection, yearned to believe him. She extended the drawing further, a silent test, and he accepted it gently, careful not to crush her fragile confidence. Amara watched, her chest aching with relief, fear, and lingering skepticism. She had built a fortress around Lila's life, and now the man who had once shattered her own heart was attempting to step inside. Could he truly be trusted? Could he truly leave behind the shadows of the past? Alexander rose slowly, keeping his eyes on Lila, his expression solemn yet determined. "I know I've lost time, years that can never be returned," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But I will spend every day making it up to both of you. I will protect you, I will love you, and I will never let anything hurt you again." Amara felt tears prick at her eyes, a mixture of relief and uncertainty twisting through her. The man before her was no longer the reckless, secretive Alexander she had once loved. He was older, tempered by time and regret, and finally fully aware of the cost of his choices. She stepped closer, cautious yet drawn by the sincerity radiating from him. "Actions, Alexander," she said firmly. "Words can't fix the past. Only what you do from this moment on matters. Cecius, do you understand?" "I understand," he whispered, nodding solemnly. "And I will prove it. Every day, every moment, for as long as it takes." Lila, small and tentative, stepped forward, holding Alexander's hand for the first time. Her grip was uncertain, testing, but filled with a quiet hope. He returned the gesture carefully, gently, as if handling the most precious thing in the world. Amara watched this moment unfold, her heart swelling with a complex mixture of relief, lingering pain, and a fragile hope she had not allowed herself to feel in years. The man she had loved, the man who had betrayed her, was attempting to rebuild what he had destroyed. Days turned into weeks, and Alexander proved himself patiently, quietly, consistently. He appeared at the coffee shop without fanfare, offering help, laughter, and gentle support. He treated Lila with care, reading her stories, playing small games, guiding her gently through questions and fears. Amara observed cautiously, noting every action, every word, every gesture. Slowly, piece by piece, he began to earn their trust. The fear that had once held her heart in a cage began to soften, replaced with cautious optimism. Lila began to smile around him more freely, laughter returning to her days in ways it had never fully left, but had been muted by years of missing her father. She clung to him sometimes, small arms wrapping around him with childlike trust, and he held her carefully, as though protecting a fragile treasure. Evenings were filled with quiet talks, dinners together, and small family routines. Alexander demonstrated patience and dedication, showing Amara he was willing to sacrifice, to change, to truly be the man and father he had promised to become. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the city, Amara found herself standing by the counter, watching Alexander and Lila draw together at a small tab. Lila giggled as Alexander exaggerated a silly character in her story, her small hands coloring energetically, free and unguarded. Amara's heart ached with emotion. Years of fear, heartbreak, and solitude had led to this fragile, beautiful moment. Could love truly heal after betrayal? Could trust be rebuilt brick by brick? She felt hope stirring cautiously, fragile but undeniable. Alexander looked up at her then, meeting her gaze across the room. His eyes, steady and sincere, conveyed more than words ever could. "I know it's not enough yet," he said quietly, "but I promise I will keep proving myself. I will not fail you again." Amara nodded slowly, the corners of her lips softening into a tentative smile. "We'll see," she replied softly, voice gentle but firm. "Trust is earned. Don't forget that." Lila suddenly looked up from her drawing, eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Daddy, can we go to the park tomorrow?" she asked innocently, her trust in him growing day by day. Alexander's face softened into a warm, heartfelt smile, and he nodded. "Of course, Lila. Tomorrow we'll go, and every day after that, I'll be here for you, always." Amara watched him interact with her daughter, the bond between them forming slowly, delicately, like sunlight breaking through the clouds after a long storm. She felt a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in years, hope that love, patience, and honesty could rebuild even the most shattered hearts. As the evening deepened, Alexander helped Lila clean up her crayons and drawings, teaching her small lessons about care, responsibility, and sharing. Lila clung to him at the end, resting her head briefly against his chest in a gesture of trust that warmed both their hearts. Amara took a deep breath, standing back, allowing herself to feel the fragile joy that had entered their lives. Perhaps the past could be reconciled, perhaps the wounds could be healed, if only carefully, patiently, and honestly. The city outside hummed with life, indifferent yet alive, a reminder that time moved forward regardless of pain, heartbreak, or joy. Within the walls of the coffee shop, however, a new chapter was beginning, a chapter of cautious hope, forgiveness, and the possibility of family. Alexander knelt beside Lila one last time before evening closed, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I promise, Lila," he said softly. "I'll always be here. I won't ever leave again. I'll do everything to make it right." Lila smiled softly, a small hand reaching to hold his. I I believe you," she whispered, her voice tender, the innocence of a child unburdened by fear or skepticism, yet tempered with hope. Amara felt tears prick at her eyes as she watched the scene unfold. The man who had caused her so much pain, now devoted to protecting and loving the child he had missed for so many years. She stepped forward, gently touching Alexander's arm. "We'll take it one day at a time," she said softly. "Together, we'll learn to trust again. And maybe, just maybe, we can find our way back." Alexander nodded, a flicker of hope breaking through the years of regret. "One day at a time," he repeated, voice filled with solemn determination. "I'll spend the rest of my life making this right." And for the first time in 5 years, Amara felt a spark of peace, a cautious optimism that the past could be healed, the broken hearts mended, and the family they had lost slowly rebuilt. Lila's eyes twinkled as she tugged at Alexander's hand. "Daddy, can we draw a big family together?" she asked, innocent and sincere, testing the boundaries of the father she had never truly known. Alexander smiled warmly, picking up the crayons. "Yes, Lila, let's draw the biggest family ever, one full of love, trust, and laughter." Amara smiled softly, a tear sliding down her cheek, feeling the weight of years lift just slightly as she watched them together. But as Alexander and Lila began to draw, a shadow fell across the doorway, a figure hing silently from the street outside, unnoticed. Its presence was faint but deliberate, and Amara's instincts, honed by years of protecting herself and Lila, immediately sensed danger. She froze, slightly, her heart skipping a beat. Something told her that while the past had been confronted, the world around them still held secrets, threats, and challenges yet to come. Alexander looked up as well, sensing the shift in the air, his protective instincts flaring. Amara, did you feel that? He asked quietly, tension creeping into his voice. Before she could respond, the bell above the shop door jingled softly, though no one had entered. The city lights flickered briefly, casting an eerie glow across the sidewalk, and a shiver ran down Amara's spine. Lila, unaware of the tension, continued drawing innocently, her laughter masking the unease that now hung in the air. Amara exchanged a glance with Alexander, both aware that their fragile peace could be threatened in an instant, that the past might not be done with them yet. And as the night deepened, the faint shadow remained outside, silent and deliberate, leaving a chilling question unspoken. Had the dangers of Alexander's former life truly ended, or were they just beginning to resurface?